In some of the early beta builds of WoW, there were dark portal placeholders in random parts of the world, including one located underwater off the coast of Azshara. For many years, the WoW community theorized that Blizzard was just using the dark portal as a placeholder for dungeons, raids, or battleground entrances. Basically, since the dark portal is placed in so many different parts of the world at random, which ended up being near those kinds of entrances anyway, it was a pretty safe assumption to make. And the only placeholder that didn't really make sense was the one located underwater. But they did have a planned battleground in that zone, and it was heavily Naga based, so a lot of people just thought it was a placeholder for the entrance to that battleground. But then, with the WoW Diary book, we found that those were not placeholders for dungeon entrances at all, and were actually potential locations for the dark portal to be placed. Now, I mentioned this in a previous video briefly, and a lot of people were very apprehensive about that explanation and insisted that they were actually just placeholders, because the dark portal has a very set location in lore already that predates vanilla WoW. But here's the thing with how they created vanilla WoW. They were very flexible with the lore and the zone layouts. They were absolutely willing to move the dark portal somewhere else if they thought it was cooler. And a lot of the lore of zones was done by other people besides Chris Metzen, who basically wrote most of WoW's lore, and was being designed alongside Warcraft 3 in the early stages, so their lore could be changed at a moment's notice. Taking a quote from the WoW Diary, Chris Metzen and the art team only vaguely knew the level ranges, which were finalized only in the last year of development. In this fluid state of indecision, even major lore objects like the Dark Portal bounced around. Chris decided to move it out of the Tree of Life area. No one on the team called it Tedrasil, letting the World Tree become its own area. He planned to move the Dark Portal to Azshara because the game designers were thinking of making it a high-level area anyway, and it was also cool to have the Dark Portal submerged in water. Eventually, Chris decided on putting it in the Blasted Lands because there wasn't really anything else interesting going on there. So, based on this quote, the Dark Portal could have absolutely ended up underwater, as I think that's even where they had it in the Warcraft movie. So it is an idea that Blizzard liked, but ultimately they just put it in the Blasted Lands, partly because there's nothing else going on there, but I think it's also partly because that's just kind of where it was supposed to be located in lore previously anyway, and they just decided to not move the Dark Portal somewhere else. They also eventually ended up scrapping the battleground in Azshara anyway, and they also converted Tedrasil into the Night Elf starting zone instead of making it into some kind of max level zone, or an entrance to the Dark Portal. Alright, and that's it for this little micro fact about WoW. I know I've covered this topic briefly in another video before, but I thought it'd be a good idea to expand upon it a little bit more, as a lot of people just straight up didn't believe me in the other video. Another thing John Stat says in the book is that many players have theories and ideas about why a lot of things happened in World of Warcraft, and like 99% of them were wrong, and a lot of decisions were done on whims or for pretty mundane reasons actually.